right now, somewhere beneath the Pret-a-Manger on Cannon Street in London. 13 feet underground, there is a layer of red ash. Every single time archaeologists dig under the modern city, under the coffee shops, the glass towers, the tube stations, they hit the exact same thing, at the same depth, in the same layer. Red, burnt, ash. And it is not just ash. It is melted glass, charred pottery baked so hard by heat that it turned into ceramic. It is the incinerated foundations of homes, and mixed into it, the burnt bones of an estimated 70,000 people. That layer has a name. Archaeologists call it the Boudiccan Destruction Horizon. It is a city-wide crime scene frozen in time, and it sits directly underneath the financial capital of the modern world. Today, we are going back to 60 AD to meet the woman who created it, a queen who was wronged so unforgivably, so brutally, that she did not just fight back, she erased a city from the face of the earth. This is the story of Boudicca, and I promise you it is not the story you think it is. To understand why this happened, you have to understand the world Boudicca was living in. The year is 60 AD. The Roman Empire is not just powerful, it is arrogant in the way that only the most powerful thing in the room can be. They have already conquered most of the known world. Egypt, Greece, Gaul, and now, Britannia, this cold, wet island, at the very edge of the map that the Romans mostly view as a vanity project, a trophy. Here is how the Romans actually talked about the native British people. The historian Cassius Dio described them as living like animals. Roman commanders wrote home about the Celtic tribes the way you would write about a pest problem. These were people the Romans genuinely believed were barely worth the paperwork. But the Romans were smart enough to know that you cannot hold an empire by force alone. So they built. Londinium, what we now call London, was only about 15 years old at this point, but it was already booming. It sat on the River Thames at the perfect crossing point, and the Romans turned it into the economic engine of the entire province. Merchants from across the empire flooded in, wine from Italy, oil from Spain, exotic goods from as far as Egypt. The forum was packed, the docks were loud, the money was flowing. To the Romans, Londinium was proof that their civilization was superior, a gleaming symbol of what happened when Rome showed up. To the native Celts watching from outside the city walls, it was something else entirely. It was a monument built on their land, taxed from their people, enforced by their subjugation. And the Romans, drunk on their own success, made a catastrophic mistake. They stopped paying attention. I need you to stay with me here, because this next part is dark. This is the part of the story that most history classes skip over, and it is the only part that actually matters, because without understanding what they did to her, you cannot understand what she did back. The Iceni were one of the largest and most powerful Celtic tribes in Britannia. They lived in what is now Norfolk and Suffolk, a region the Romans had technically allowed to remain semi-autonomous under a client king named Prasutagus. Prasutagus was smart. He played the game. He cooperated with Rome, kept the peace, and grew wealthy. And when he knew he was dying, he drew up a will designed to protect his family. He split his kingdom 50-50. Half to Rome, half to his wife and 2 daughters. It was a gesture of good faith, a peace offering from a dying man. The Romans read the will, and then they ignored it. Roman officials marched into Iceni territory and declared that client kingdoms do not get to have succession plans. The whole thing now belonged to Rome, full stop. They stripped the Iceni nobles of their estates. They treated Prasutagus' lands like a conquered territory to be looted, not a partner kingdom to be respected. And then, and this is the part that started a war, they went to the palace. They dragged Queen Boudicca, the widow of their supposed ally, into the courtyard in front of her people, and they flogged her, publicly, deliberately, to humiliate her, and her 2 teenage daughters, her children. I will let you fill in the rest. The Romans thought this would work. That is the thing people miss. This was not random cruelty, this was calculated. This was policy. You humiliate the leader publicly, you break their spirit, and the tribe falls into line. It had worked before. But here is what the Roman officials standing in that courtyard did not understand. They had just handed a grieving, brilliant, furious queen the single most powerful recruiting tool in the ancient world, a reason. Word spread through the Celtic tribes like wildfire. Not just what the Romans had done to Boudicca's daughters, though that alone was enough. It was everything. The taxation that had bled them dry, the enslavement, the theft of land, the Roman temple in Camulodunum, modern-day Colchester, that had been built as a literal monument to the emperor's divinity, funded by forced Celtic labor. Tribe after tribe that had been grinding their teeth for 17 years looked at Boudicca and said, "Now." Ancient sources estimate her army at somewhere between 100,000 and 230,000 warriors. Modern historians are skeptical of the higher numbers, but even the conservative estimates are staggering. This was not a rebellion. This was a nation rising. And Boudicca, described by the Roman historian Tacitus as tall, with a fierce gaze, a harsh voice, and a great mass of red hair, she understood something the Romans did not. She was not building an empire. She was not trying to negotiate terms or hold territory. She was there to make the Romans feel, for one terrible moment, what her people had felt for 17 years. The first city to fall was Camulodunum. The civilian population had been warned. The Roman Senate claimed a divine omen. The statue of victory toppled from its base without anyone touching it, facing backwards, as if fleeing. They were not wrong. Boudicca's forces hit the city before reinforcements could arrive. The Roman veterans who lived there barricaded themselves inside the temple of Claudius. They lasted 2 days. Camulodunum was gone. Now here is where it gets really dark. The Roman governor, Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, was on the opposite side of the island fighting a completely separate campaign. When the news reached him, he made an immediate calculation. He could not save Londinium in time. Think about what that meant for the people of Londinium. The city was wealthy and completely undefended. No walls, no garrison, just merchants, tradespeople, slaves, administrators, and a message from their own governor saying, essentially, "Get out if you can. We cannot help you." Some fled south on the Thames in boats. The ones who were too old, too slow, too disbelieving, the ones who thought surely Rome would not abandon them, they stayed. They were wrong. Boudicca's army entered Londinium, and they did not conquer it. They consumed it. The Roman historian Dio describes scenes of systematic, ritualistic revenge. The wealthy, the ones who most represented the face of Roman exploitation, were singled out. The statues of the emperor were decapitated. His stone face rolled through the burning streets. The Forum, the great symbol of Roman civilization and commerce, was put to the torch. And the fire was so hot, so sustained, and so total that the clay walls of the buildings did not just burn, they baked. They turned into ceramic. And that ceramic, fused with melted glass and scorched bone, compacted over 2,000 years into the layer archaeologists keep finding today. 13 feet underground, a citywide scar. Verulamium modern St Albans fell next. 3 cities, possibly 70,000 dead. The largest military catastrophe Rome had suffered in Britain. And Boudicca was not done. But Rome was Rome for a reason. Governor Suetonius regrouped. He pulled his legions together, roughly 10,000 disciplined, professional soldiers, and he chose his ground carefully. The Battle of Watling Street was the Roman Empire at its most precise. Suetonius picked a narrow valley flanked by forest. Boudicca's army could not flank him. Her 100,000 warriors had all the energy and fury in the world, but they were funneled into a kill zone where numbers did not matter. The Romans held the line. They let the wave crash against them. And then they pushed. Here is the brutal detail that most people do not know. Boudicca's supporters had brought their families to watch the battle. Wives, children. Carts arranged in a semicircle at the back of the field so everyone could witness the Roman defeat. When Boudicca's army broke and started to flee, they could not. The carts were blocking their own retreat. The slaughter was catastrophic. Tacitus claims 80,000 Britons died. The revolt was over. And Boudicca, the queen who had been publicly humiliated, who had watched her daughters violated, who had raised a nation and reduced 3 cities to ash, chose her own ending. Ancient sources say she took poison, died on her own terms with her daughters beside her, before Rome could parade her through the streets of the city she had tried to destroy. The Romans rebuilt. Of course they did. That is what Rome did. They came back to the ash layer and they built Londinium again. Better, bigger. They gave it walls this time. The city grew into one of the most important in the empire. and then it grew into the city we know today. But here is what I cannot stop thinking about. The Bank of England, the London Stock Exchange, the skyscrapers of Canary Wharf, all of it sits above that same red layer, above the melted glass and the baked clay and the burnt bones. Rome never forgot Boudicca. Tacitus, a Roman, wrote about her with something that reads almost like respect, maybe guilt. The empire tightened its grip on Britannia after the revolt, but it also quietly stopped some of the worst abuses. The officials who had carried out the flogging and the assault were recalled. They never officially admitted why. Boudicca did not win the war, but she forced the most powerful empire in the history of the ancient world to look in the mirror. And in the end, she got a statue. She stands in bronze, on a chariot, directly across the Thames from the city she burned, overlooking the parliament that governs the nation she fought for, 2,000 years later, still watching. If this story hit you the way it hit me when I first read it, subscribe because we go this deep on history every single week. I will see you in the next one.